So I'd like to start by telling you a story. I'm going to tell you a story about an entrepreneur named H.B. Now, H.B. was born in 1879 in Muddy Creek Forks, Pennsylvania. And he was an ambitious kid. He was a farmer, though. He was a farmer. He tended to the land. He milked the cows. And one day he saw in the paper actually an advertisement from a chocolate entrepreneur named Milton Hershey. Now, Milton Hershey was looking for people to help him tend to his land and ultimately his cows that led to his iconic chocolate. And so HB jumped on that opportunity to work for Mr. Hershey. Little did he know, after he started working for him, that Mr. Hershey was making $75 a minute with his amazing chocolate. And so HB decided to make his own chocolate. So he gets in his basement, and on nights and weekends, he was stirring up different concoctions and spilling chocolate everywhere. But eventually, he decided to add peanut butter. Now, peanut butter at the time was a healthy, high-protein food alternative. And so, but when he mixed that with chocolate, he came up with the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, or better known as the Harry Burnett's Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. And so, maybe this is me, and I'll admitting to my sweet tooth, but it could also be a way of looking at an interesting innovation, mixing two seemingly unconventional ingredients together to create something completely new. And so I want to use this as a metaphor to think about maybe we can merge multiple industries together as we think about future business models. And maybe we can think about the overlap of these industries and where true innovation could happen in the future. So just to give you some examples, let me start by telling you a little bit more about my story. So, it's my chocolate and peanut butter story, or more specifically, how I merged entertainment and technology really to think about the future of what that was going to look like. So 4 or 5 years ago, just to give you some context, the music industry was going through transition. Digital music accounted for a low, kind of double-digit share of the consumption of music at the time. Obviously, the music industry was struggling to find its footing and what the digital landscape would be. And there were artists that were running away from, but also some that were running toward technology and finding ways to leverage it to unlock additional value. And so I, at the time, was living in Los Angeles and working at one of the largest talent agencies in the world, and I had the opportunity to actually sit down with one of these artists. Now, this artist was a Grammy Award-winning rock band, and they were known for being a hybrid, and so they obviously knew that there was benefit to actually leaning into this new industry and trying to find ways to unlock new value. And so a lunch became a job opportunity, which ultimately led to an adventure, and we embarked on just that. And so I started to make pilgrimages up to Silicon Valley and really try to understand what was the tech industry all about. And what we realized is there was a lot to really share. There was a lot of bartering that we could do with our skill sets. And so we'd go up and teach them about fan bases and content and understanding the entertainment landscape, and they in turn would teach us about how to actually be successful in the tech industry and what were those strategies that we can ultimately apply. And so not everything worked like chocolate and peanut butter, but for the things that did, we actually merged them into our business model and actually tried to come up with the future of what entertainment would be. And what we realized is that the future of entertainment was going to be tech and data driven. It was going to be broadly distributed and democratic, and ultimately based on the ability for Silicon Valley and Hollywood to really speak the same language and learn to collaborate. And so now, even that I work at a traditional media company and I continue to look at bridging to amazingly entrepreneurial individuals and venture capitalists and members of the tech community, this experience has kind of given me some insights that I'd love to share with you guys today on what I think the future of a lot of industries could be. So let's start by thinking and realizing that technology is at the center of everything. Technology is really embedded within and really empowering a lot of different industries. And it's, again, those industry titans and entrepreneurs that are able to lean into this tech trend that'll ultimately be successful in the future. But what I'm really trying to pose or try to think about today is, as an aftershock to this tech trend, will we start to see the industries themselves start to merge together? And will that really create new unlocked value through these industries coming together to actually create new value at that overlap, but ultimately blurring the lines of what each discrete industry might be? And so similar again to the music industry, if we think about it like that, it's the lines of genres that have merged and actually blurred that have really unlocked and unearthed some of the artists that have been most iconic of our day today. Can we think about that in an industry format and really think about bridging industries together to look about what the future business models might be? So now that we have that concept, let me give you some examples to really kind of bring that home a little bit. What if we were to look at merging, healthcare and banking? Now, what we might get is this. This is Fitbit, Qualcomm, and United Healthcare, who have come together to actually create financial incentives or give financial incentives that are actually responsive to health and fitness trackers. Now, this is a great example of a joint venture within a lot of companies that are looking at the future of what their discrete industry might be and realize the value that they can unlock from partnering together and thinking about that future. But what if we were to look at business models that were created, or hybrid business models that were created from the ground up with this understanding in mind? And what we might get is something like this. What if we were to mix mobility or logistics and healthcare? Now, what we might get is Zipline. Now, Zipline is the first national commercial drone operator that's actually providing blood and vaccines to rural areas in Rwanda. Now, what the founder realized here is that in rural areas, the roads actually aren't paved, and so during rainy season, it led to a lot of floods and mudslides. And so by leveraging a mobility innovation, he was actually able to bring vaccines and blood to these much needed rural areas and these doctors that were working on patients in rural areas of Rwanda. Here's another example. What if we were to look at merging agriculture and real estate? Now, what we might get there is a company like this, which is Aero Farms. Now, what Aero Farms realize is that they're actually taking warehouses and reimagining, relics of a more industrial age to actually create some of the largest vertical production farms in the world. And so what the founders realize is that by not only taking these commercial spaces and reimagining them for vertical farming, they could actually bring produce and farming actually closer to the city centers, actually being able to bring this produce more efficiently and faster to areas that would normally have to wait weeks in order to get this type of produce. And lastly, another example, and this one was really, I had the opportunity to go on a learning trip down in Jakarta, Indonesia, and I met this company, Gojek, and I was able to see these drivers in person on the roads. Now, what they started as is a phone dispatch company, so merging riders and drivers, ultimately, of these ojeks, as they call them, or scooters. But since then, they've continued to merge all these multiple industries on top of that platform as a result, and really created the hybrid business model of the future. And so let's take a deeper look. So they're taking, first, merging riders and drivers via phone dispatch service, via mobile app. What they then realized is that once they had these drivers out into the marketplace, they can now build a logistics business on top of that. And so they provided last mile delivery for a lot of different companies within the city center. Once they had mastered kind of the logistics business, they realized they can now partner with local restaurants and actually provide delivery for a lot of these local restaurants, allowing them to, again, be more efficient with the way that they reach their customers. Now, once they started doing those type of things, they realized they had to find a way to make payments and collect payments, really. And so they created a mobile banking system and actually allowed them to be able to collect mobile payments in a cashless economy. And then even still, on top of that insight, they realized not only do now that they have all these drivers, they have to give them insurance, right? The drivers needed to have insurance, not just on an annual basis, but on a daily basis that really aligned with the way that they were working. And so they built a new insurance instrument that allowed for that type of insurance for their different drivers to realize their dreams. And even yet still, as you can see, they've continued to add multiple businesses on top of this strong base. And now you start to look at a company like Gojek and you realize that there's so many businesses within the one that's really blurring the lines of what this actual business or this industry might sit in. So that being said, I'm sure you're starting to think to yourself, like maybe there's 2 or 3 or 4 different industries that you either sit within or kind of sit around that you might want to find ways to merge together to build the hybrid business model of the future. But let me give you a little bit of context. HB, again, remember HB? HB, before he came up with chocolate and peanut butter, he tried a lot of different things. He tried chocolate and cotton candy. He tried chocolate and molasses. Now all these are extremely delicious, I'm sure we'll all agree, but definitely not as iconic as the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. And similarly with us, as we started to look at merging the entertainment and tech industry, not everything worked, but it's the trial and error and that journey that we're taking to try to find where that overlap does work that'll ultimately lead to what that future could look like. And so let me give you some insights that I've been able to find that might help you along your journey, ultimately to find kind of what these hybrid business models could be in the future. The first one I would say would be full immersion. Now, you can't just read about these industries. You really have to embed yourself within them. You have to live and breathe within these industries and really get your hands dirty and understand what is it that makes these industries tick. The second that kind of leads you to is pattern recognition. So once you understand what these industries are about, you want to kind of dig a little bit deeper and think about what is it about the business models of the companies within these industries that make them successful, but then ultimately how can you take those business models and those patterns and apply that to another industry to actually find what that hybrid or what that new business might look like. And lastly, have a sweet tooth. Right? And what I mean is stay curious, stay hungry, ask why and why not. And again, it's that trial and error that you really need to go on in order to find out what this future will look like. And ultimately, when it's all said and done, don't be afraid to pour chocolate all over every industry in your search for the future of. Thank you.